I knew he was lying. I knew it for years. I used to stare at the bathroom mirror in the early morning light, toothbrush in hand, and whisper to myself, "Today, you'll ask him." But I never did. He was always so convincing, so collected, and when someone lies that calmly, that cleanly, you start to wonder if maybe you're the one imagining it. But I wasn't imagining it. I saw the signs. I felt the shifts, the long pauses when I asked where he was, the way he looked at his phone just a bit too long before putting it down. The Tuesday nights that became sacred and untouchable. At first, I thought I'd misheard, misread, overreacted. But then I found the receipt, and the silence inside me grew louder. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw plates or pack bags. Instead, I folded the evidence and slid it into the back of my drawer, like it was a family photo. Why? Because if I brought it into the open, I'd have to destroy the life I built around it. This isn't a story about a man who cheated. We've all heard those. This is a story about a woman who stayed, who watched it happen, who made dinner, folded laundry, and smiled at holiday photos, all while knowing that the person she loved most was living a double life, and she was letting him. Not because she was stupid, not because she was weak, but because sometimes the lie is easier than the emptiness. This was my lie, my silence, my secret, and I'm going to tell it now. I met Mark when I was 26. It was one of those meetings that didn't feel like fate or fireworks, just calm, quiet alignment. We were introduced at a friend's backyard barbecue. He wasn't flashy or loud. In fact, he barely said anything at all. But there was something about the way he listened that made me feel visible. And after years of dating men who treated conversations like competitions, that was refreshing. Mark worked in logistics. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but he had a steady job, a small apartment, and he drove a reliable, if slightly dented, Honda Civic. I was working part-time at an independent bookstore, still trying to figure out if my English degree would ever mean anything. I didn't have much, but I had hope. And in him, I thought I saw stability. We started dating right after that barbecue. Tuesday dinners, Saturday matinees, long walks around Lincoln Park. We didn't talk about forever, not yet, but it felt like we were both moving toward the same kind of life. Simple, predictable, safe. 3 months in, he proposed. No big speech, no ring hidden in dessert. Just us, sitting on the couch, half watching a movie neither of us liked. He looked over and said, "I think we should get married." And I said yes, like I was agreeing to a grocery list. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't magical. But it felt real. 6 months later, we were married in a courthouse. I wore a pale blue dress and carried lilies. He wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit. There were no photographers, no dance floors, just our parents, 2 witnesses, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I remember thinking, this is what grown-up love looks like. Practical, modest, quiet. Our first apartment was tiny. 1 bedroom, a leaking faucet, and a neighbor who played trumpet at 2 a.m. We argued about dishes and money, like most newlyweds. But there was laughter too. Nights eating cereal in bed, trips to the farmer's market, lazy Sundays with the windows open and our feet tangled on the couch. Eventually, we decided to move. We found a modest house in the suburbs of Illinois, white siding, creaky floors, and a backyard just big enough for a barbecue and a plastic kiddie pool. It wasn't much, but it felt like ours. That's where we built our life, where we planted flowers and argued about bills, where we painted the nursery yellow before our son was born. And then 2 years later, our daughter arrived, all lungs and fire. And suddenly, I wasn't just a wife. I was a mother, a caretaker, the glue. I quit my job at the bookstore, not because anyone asked me to, but because it made sense. Mark's income could cover the essentials, and we both agreed the kids needed one of us home. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back once they started school. But somehow, the years stretched like elastic, and I never did. Mark worked hard. He left early, came home late, especially on Tuesdays. Always Tuesdays. He said Tuesdays were inventory nights, big shipments, long hours, chaos in the warehouse. I never questioned it. Not really. I wanted to believe we were still on the same team, still walking side by side. But slowly, I started to feel the quiet between us growing thicker. He'd come home exhausted, eat in silence, scroll through his phone, and fall asleep on the couch. I stopped asking how his day was. He stopped asking anything at all. We became functional, efficient, like coworkers running a small, chaotic company called family. And every Tuesday night, he stayed late. And every Tuesday night, I stared at the clock, wondering what was happening outside the life we built. There were small things that started to pile up. Things that didn't scream betrayal, just whispered discomfort. He changed his cologne, said the store discontinued the old one, but the new scent felt younger, sharper, not him. He started keeping his phone face down, began carrying breath mints, even though he hated peppermint. Once I found a long blonde hair on the passenger seat of our car. He said it must have been from the dry cleaner, maybe a customer before him. I nodded, but inside, something tightened. I began watching more closely, not stalking or snooping, just noticing. Patterns, gaps, the way he smiled when he got a text, and how he quickly turned the screen away. Still, I said nothing. I convinced myself I was overthinking, that motherhood had made me paranoid, that boredom had made me suspicious. But the silence between us grew heavier. Meals became mechanical. Affection turned into routine gestures. A kiss on the cheek, a hand on the shoulder, like we were actors in a long-running play we didn't know how to exit. And yet, there were still good moments. Watching our son learn to ride a bike. Movie nights with the kids piled between us on the couch. Birthdays, anniversaries, smiles caught on camera. Proof that some part of our life was still real. I clung to those fragments like lifeboats. Then, on our 12th anniversary, he bought me a necklace. Simple, silver, with a small blue stone. I remember thinking it looked expensive, too expensive. I asked where he got it. He said, online, had a coupon. He smiled as he clasped it around my neck, and I smiled too. But inside, I wondered, was this a gift for me, or a cover for guilt? That night, after the kids went to bed, we sat on the porch. It was chilly, and I wrapped myself in a blanket. He lit a cigar, something he only did when he was nervous. We talked about nothing, the weather, the neighbor's new car, a leaky gutter. I looked at him, really looked, and realized I didn't know this man anymore. I knew his habits, his rhythms, but not his heart. And I wasn't sure he knew mine. That realization didn't come with a dramatic gasp or a tearful breakdown. It came quietly, like fog rolling in, soft and suffocating. Still, I stayed. I told myself I was doing it for the kids, that they deserved a whole family, not pieces, that someday things might shift back into place, that maybe he'd come back to me, the version of him I married, the man who used to run his fingers through my hair while I read in bed. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of starting over, of being alone, of admitting that the life I had built was no longer mine. So I played my role: mother, wife, anchor. And every Tuesday night, I watched the clock. 9 to 12 p.m., 9:47 p.m., 10:03 p.m. Then the garage door would open. He'd come in smelling faintly of soap and mint, kiss my forehead, and say, "Long day?" And I'd nod, smile, and say, "I figured." Then I'd turn back to whatever show I wasn't watching and pretend not to notice the silence screaming between us. I don't remember when I stopped waiting up for him, or when I started pretending to be asleep when I heard the garage door. But I remember the first night I didn't even hear it at all. And that scared me more than anything else. I began measuring my life in Tuesdays. Not birthdays, not anniversaries, not holidays, just Tuesdays. They became markers of quiet dread, of watching the clock tick past the time he said he'd be home, of brushing my teeth in silence, of lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin and spin and spin, like it might fling itself loose if it went just a bit faster. I never told anyone, not my sister, not my best friend, certainly not my mother. I didn't want advice. I didn't want judgment. I didn't even want comfort. I just wanted the lie to keep working, to keep the wheels turning, to keep the children laughing in the morning, and the house clean, and the lunches packed, and the bills paid, and the birthdays remembered. Because if I spoke the truth out loud, even once, the entire system would collapse. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. So I pressed on, pretending, smiling, making small talk with the other moms at soccer practice, baking banana bread, folding socks into perfect pairs. And every Tuesday night, I left the porch light on. I told myself it was for him, but maybe it was for me. Proof that someone would come home, that something still connected us, even if I couldn't feel it anymore. And that somehow the version of our life I was clinging to wasn't just a memory. It was still real, at least for now. It happened on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday, which felt wrong somehow. I was cleaning out the car, not because it needed it, but because I needed to feel useful. There were Cheerios in the cup holders, a broken crayon under the passenger seat, and one of our daughter's missing sneakers wedged behind the driver's seat. I reached for it, and my hand brushed against something stiff. It was a receipt, folded, slightly crumpled, stained with something that looked like coffee. I almost threw it away without looking, but something made me pause. I unfolded it, read it once, then again. Hilton Garden Inn, room 214, Tuesday night, 8:37 p.m., 2 guests, 1 night. I stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. My fingers felt numb. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there, holding the receipt, while the sound of birds chirping and a lawnmower in the distance filled the silence. I walked into the house. I tucked the receipt in my underwear drawer, under an old pair of tights I hadn't worn in years. Then I made dinner. I chopped carrots. I seasoned the chicken. I set the table. And when Mark came home, I kissed him on the cheek and asked about his day. He said it was long, that there was a shipment delay, that he might need to travel next week. I nodded, smiled, passed him the salt, and all the while, the receipt sat in the drawer like a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. The next day, I took it out and stared at it again. Nothing had changed. Not the date, not the time, not the name of the hotel, but something inside me had. I wasn't surprised. Not really. Some part of me had known for years, but seeing it in ink, seeing the proof, made it real, made it undeniable. I thought about confronting him. I played the conversation in my head a dozen ways. Who is she? How long has this been going on? Why? But none of the versions felt right. None of them ended well. In all of them, I ended up crying. He ended up leaving. The kids ended up broken. So I didn't confront him. Instead, I buried the receipt again. This time in a shoebox at the back of my closet, under old letters and hospital bracelets from the kids' births. Artifacts of another life. A better life. Or maybe just a more innocent one. After that, I started seeing everything differently. Every word he said felt rehearsed. Every touch felt hollow. Even his laughter sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. And yet, we still functioned. We still hosted dinner for the neighbors, still cheered at soccer games, still bought groceries together on Sundays. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, that there would be a time when I could ask, and he'd tell me the truth, and we'd handle it like adults. But that moment never came. Because I wasn't really waiting for him to confess. I was waiting for myself to be ready to hear it. And I wasn't. Not yet. I began living in two separate realities. In one, I was the wife, dutiful, composed, functioning. I packed school lunches, attended PTA meetings, paid bills, laughed at sitcom reruns with the kids, posted birthday photos with carefully chosen captions, smiled when neighbors waved from across the street. In the other, I was a woman unraveling quietly. I would lie in bed beside Mark, watching the rise and fall of his chest, wondering if he even remembered the name of the woman he'd been with the night before. I would watch him brush his teeth, rinse his mouth, towel his face, like nothing in the world was wrong. And I would mirror him, wordlessly, perfectly. It was a dance I learned fast. We never fought, not about anything real. We argued about the thermostat, about whether to buy name-brand cereal, about where to hang the kids' chore chart, but never about Tuesdays. He didn't know I knew, and I wasn't ready for him to find out. Instead, I poured myself into the routine. I became obsessive about details, matching socks, alphabetizing the spice rack, folding towels into perfect thirds, because control over those small things made the bigger ones feel manageable. Some nights, I'd sit in the laundry room long after the dryer stopped, just folding the same shirt again and again until I could breathe. Once, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize myself. My eyes looked tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from pretending, from holding a story inside that had no pages, no chapters, no ending. And still, I said nothing. I kept smiling when he walked in the door. I kept setting 4 plates at the table. I kept asking about his day and pretending to listen to the lies he told so effortlessly. It became our ritual, his dishonesty, my silence. A partnership built not on love anymore, but on fear. I wasn't afraid he'd leave me. I was afraid I wouldn't know who I was if he did. One Tuesday around midnight, I walked past our bedroom window and saw him sitting in his car. Engine off, lights out, just sitting. He didn't come inside for another 20 minutes, and when he did, he was unusually quiet. Quieter than usual, if that's even possible. He didn't make eye contact, didn't kiss my forehead, just walked past me like I was a coat rack. I stood in the hallway long after he disappeared upstairs, staring at the closed door to our bedroom, wondering what I had become. Not just in his eyes, but in my own. I wasn't angry, not the way I thought I'd be. I was hollow, like a house that's been emptied out, but still smells like the people who used to live there. I started dreaming of leaving, not in some dramatic escape, no bags packed in the middle of the night, no slamming doors, but quieter, like evaporating. I imagined waking up early, writing a note, and just driving, maybe to a hotel by the lake, maybe to my sister's house up north, somewhere I could breathe again. But then the kids would wake up, and I'd be back at the stove, flipping pancakes, folding lunch napkins into triangles, braiding my daughter's hair. Life pulled me back, every time. I began journaling, not full entries, just fragments. Today he didn't look at me once. Laundry folded, dinner made, still invisible. I am wallpaper. Once I wrote, if I disappeared, would he even notice? Or just assume I blended into the furniture like everything else? I tore that page out and burned it in the sink because the truth was too loud and I wasn't ready to hear it echo. I told myself I was staying for the kids, but the truth? I was staying because I didn't know where else to exist. Because even in a home that no longer held me, I at least knew where everything was. And somehow, that felt safer than walking into the unknown, even if the unknown was finally honest. It happened on a Sunday. The kids were at their grandparents'. The house was quiet in that eerie, unnatural way. No footsteps, no cartoons, no spilled juice. I had just folded the last load of laundry and was putting the basket down when he walked into the kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was uncomfortable. And before I could think twice, before I could talk myself out of it, like every time before, I said it. I know about the hotel. He froze. His hand stopped mid-air. His mouth opened just slightly, like he was about to speak, but no words came out. He didn't ask, what hotel? He didn't say, you're crazy. He didn't laugh. He just stood there, caught, like a deer in a spotlight, but calmer, like someone who knew this moment was inevitable and had finally arrived. I thought he'd deny it, defend himself, make up something, anything. But he didn't. After a pause, he nodded. Once. Almost imperceptibly. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and looked out the window like there was something very important happening in the backyard. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat across from him. And we said nothing. 5 minutes passed. maybe more. The silence between us was no longer just uncomfortable, it was transformative. It swallowed the years we'd spent pretending. It consumed the games and the smiles and the unspoken pacts. Finally, he said, "I never wanted to hurt you." And I replied, "But you did." He didn't argue. He didn't reach for me. He didn't ask for forgiveness. And strangely, that hurt more than if he had fought, because at least fighting means you want something to be saved. He just accepted it, accepted that I knew, accepted that I had always known, accepted that we were done, not in paper or law, but in something far more final, in spirit. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. I didn't storm out. He didn't sleep on the couch. I simply brought a pillow and a blanket to the living room, curled up with my back to the television, and let the hum of the fridge fill the silence. And for the first time in years, I cried. Not because of what he did, but because I had allowed myself to live so long pretending I was okay. Because I had ignored the version of me that used to want more. That version of me had gone quiet. And tonight, she whispered, I'm still here. The days after weren't explosive. There were no packed bags, no yelling in the driveway, no neighbors whispering, just stillness. We didn't speak of it again. Not once. He still left for work every morning, still kissed the kids goodnight, still mowed the lawn on Saturdays and grilled chicken too dry on Sundays. But something between us had turned to ash. The rhythm of our life remained, but the melody was gone. He slept on his side of the bed. I slept on mine, like co-tenants with separate leases, sharing a roof, but not a life. We learned how to exist in that silence, a kind of truce made of exhaustion, of resignation. Sometimes I wondered if he thought I'd forget, that if we just kept moving, I'd go back to believing. But I didn't. Everything changed, even if nothing looked different. I stopped waiting up for him, stopped pretending to care about where he'd been. I stopped wearing the necklace he gave me, stopped packing his favorite snacks in his lunchbox. And he noticed. Of course he noticed. But he never said anything. That was the rule now. Silence in, silence out. The kids didn't know. Not really. But they felt it. Children always do. The way their shoulders tightened when we were all in the same room. The way they watched our faces when one of us spoke, like they were tracking tension on a fault line. And that hurt more than anything. Because I had promised myself that if I ever found out, I would leave. I had told myself I'd never raise them in a house without love. But I didn't leave, and every time I looked at them, I wondered what I was teaching them about marriage, about forgiveness, about self-worth. The couch became my safe place. I started sleeping there more often than not. Some nights with a book in my lap I never turned the page of. Some nights staring at the blank TV screen, seeing nothing. I started talking to myself, out loud. Not full conversations, just little things. You're okay. You'll get through this. Just one more day. It wasn't courage. It wasn't healing. It was endurance. I didn't tell my friends. Didn't go to therapy. Didn't seek advice. Because I wasn't ready to explain how I got here. How someone like me, someone smart and strong and capable, had stayed so long inside a hollow life. But I was beginning to see it, to feel it, The hollow wasn't mine alone. It had become ours. And eventually, that silence would have to break. But not yet. 12 years. That's how long he lied. But the harder truth, the one I struggle to admit, is that I let him. Not because I didn't know. I knew. Not because I was weak, but because I was scared and tired and convinced that silence was the safer choice. Sometimes survival doesn't look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like folding the laundry and setting the table and smiling through hollow birthdays. Sometimes it looks like making peace with pretending. I told myself I was doing it for the kids, for the family, for the life we built. But now I know. I was doing it because I had forgotten how to choose myself. It didn't happen all at once. The forgetting. It was slow. A drip, not a flood. You give up one thing, a dream, a boundary, a piece of joy, and it doesn't seem like much. But then another goes, and another, until you look in the mirror and see someone you don't quite recognize. I still haven't left. We still live in the same house, share the same bills, smile for the same cameras at family events. But I'm not the same. I've started remembering things. The sound of my own voice when I sing. The way coffee tastes when I drink it alone without rushing. The feel of pages between my fingers when I read for no one but me. I've started writing again. Nothing fancy, just little things. Sentences that don't have to impress anyone. Words that belong only to me. And I've started imagining a different future. One where my worth isn't measured by how well I pretend. One where love isn't something I earn by staying quiet. Maybe I'll leave someday. Maybe I won't have to. But what I know now, what I wish I had known then, is that silence isn't strength. And it's not shame either. It's a signal, a voice that's waiting to be heard. And if you're listening to this, if you're living in a silence that's eating away at you, I want you to know you're not alone. We don't talk about this part of marriage. The quiet betrayals, the long endurance, the ache of staying. But I see you. I am you. And someday, when you're ready, I hope you find your voice again. This was mine. Thank you for listening.